We obviously already have a really weird week ahead of us in fantasy football. We've got 3 Thanksgiving Day games on Thursday, which is, as of right now, tomorrow as of this filming. And we've got some big name guys coming back from injury, namely Kyren Williams, and some guys out because of injury. So today we need to go through the top 30 running back rankings for Week 12 fantasy football. And do not forget, guys, I am still giving away a bunch of free FFN hats right here. And the only way you need to do to qualify for one of these free hats is to go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and put your hottest take for Week 12 fantasy football in the comments below. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So let's go ahead and get right into these rankings right now. So number 1, he's still in his own tier because he belongs here by himself. It's Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. This week, he takes on the Seattle Seahawks. Does it really matter ever with Christian McCaffrey? I mean, he didn't have a touchdown for like the first time in like 20 games a couple of weeks ago, and then he got right back to getting in the end zone just last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This guy is as consistent as it really gets as far as hitting his floor, which is about 15 points, and his ceiling is about 40 points. Christian McCaffrey is always going to be at the top. David Montgomery and Gibbs back-to-back here at 2 and 3. It sounds really high, but they're playing on Thanksgiving Day as well, taking on the Green Bay Packers at home. So first of all, Detroit usually puts up a really good showing on Thanksgiving. So they already have that in their favor. Number 2, I've been saying this for weeks now. Both of these running backs are absolutely relevant, and they will continue to be relevant. A couple of weeks ago, I came out with a video about players that you need to get before your fantasy football playoffs, and I said both of these Detroit running backs are great for your fantasy football playoffs. These 2 running backs are just running behind one of the best offensive lines in football. They're on one of the best offenses in football, and they're geared towards running and basically sharing the same amount of touches. Dave Montgomery had 14 touches last week, so did Gibbs, and they're both excellent fantasy plays on a weekly basis, and they're taking on the Packers this week. I love both of these guys right now. And then I've got Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne, and Austin Eckler, the last guys in this particular tier. Now, Jonathan Taylor, to start out with him, the takeover has happened. There's no more questions about Zach Moss. He has now become irrelevant, which is what I predicted earlier, but kind of went back on that prediction a couple weeks ago. Zach Moss is no longer necessary to roster in fantasy football. Jonathan Taylor is now handling the majority of the backfield work. And he's already an efficient player, and he's actually becoming better. And this offense, I've been saying this all season, is so well run, so well coached. They're just going to continue to do well with Jonathan Taylor against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's why he's up here at number 4. And Travis Etienne has dropped down a little bit for me. He's not leaving the top 5, though. He's just not. Travis Etienne's taking on the Texans this week, who have been not very good against fantasy running backs this year. Travis Etienne, to me, is a guy that I discussed a couple of weeks ago as possibly a buy low target this week if he had 2 straight bad games, and that's exactly what happened. Travis Etienne had 2 straight bad games, and now is a prime buy low opportunity for you this week if your trade deadline has not passed. And if it has passed and you have him, fire him up with complete confidence this week against the Houston Texans. And then it's Austin Eckler taking on the Baltimore Ravens. The matchup is no good. And honestly, when you look at the numbers and watch Austin Eckler play, he's definitely not as explosive as he used to be. He's not as efficient as he used to be. He's not as really just as capable of a player as he used to be because he's reaching that age that's not good for running backs. There's worries here I have with Austin Eckler, especially in a tough matchup versus Baltimore. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it just comes down to a player that is he's such a major threat to get in the end zone every single week. And it's also a situation where it's like, this guy gets all kinds of targets every week too. So he's still viable and still a top tier option for various amount of reasons. And that's why Austin Eckler's at 6. Saquon Barkley at 7 here, taking on the New England Patriots in New England. I've been saying this for weeks on Saquon. He's the entire New York Giants offense. Now, last week was a surprise. Honestly, I did not have him ranked very highly last week. And it was just because we hadn't seen any sort of offense generated by Tommy DeVito. Like, it just hasn't been there. And he came out and he was the running back 1 last week. Got in the end zone twice. Receiving game through the roof. Like, Saquon Barkley is so important on a weekly basis, and it really just is going to depend on matchup. Washington has a terrible defense, so does New England. New England's defense is garbage. They can't stop anybody, and they can't score points. So Saquon Barkley's going to get plenty of opportunities again, probably in the range of 25 to 30 opportunities. And if that's the case, against this matchup, Saquon Barkley is a legit great play this week. Derrick Henry, let me tell you this right now. He's taking on the Carolina Panthers. I discussed him as a buy low trade target last week, heading into week 11. And I said the schedule that he's got is really good. And I think that he will bounce back after a bad game. Well, he didn't do that in week 12. Week 11, I'm sorry. He did not bounce back. He had another bad game. And it leaves you wondering, like, what is really going to be the future for Derrick Henry? I discussed this with Jalen Waddle on the wide receiver rankings video on Tuesday, and I said this may be the last time that Jalen Waddle's inside the top 10. I feel very similar right now with Derrick Henry. If he can't do it against Carolina, it's over. It's over. I'm hedging my bet against it, though. I'm hedging my bet for him to have a great game. Every running back that's played Carolina has ripped them apart. Carolina sucks at defending running backs. Derrick Henry, it's your last chance, man. You got to produce this week, and I am betting on him doing that. And then I've got Alvin Kamara right here at number 9. Alvin Kamara is just simply in a situation where he started out getting every touch possible. He was getting like 25 to 30 opportunities per game. And the past 2 weeks, he's had 9 carries in each game, but he's still seeing 7 to 8 targets per game. So it's like the volume is still there from a running back 1 perspective in fantasy football, but it's not like it once was. Now this week, he's taking on the Atlanta Falcons out of the bye week. Maybe it was an injury-related thing, why he was getting less carries. I never read anything about it. I have no idea. I'm banking on him having a good game, though, against the Falcons, because I just think that with the targets he's already seeing, and if he gets 15 carries, I think that this is going to be a really good game for him. I've got Kyren Williams at number 10 here. Kyren Williams making his return for the Los Angeles Rams, and he's taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Matchup is obviously fantastic. I've got no issue whatsoever with the matchup, and I've also got no issue from the fact of Los Angeles has lots of wide receiver issues. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, they're both limited, and they're both day-to-day right now. So they don't have 2 of their top 3 playmakers. Kyren Williams is coming back off the IR against a great matchup here. Kyren Williams, I think you can fire him up right over Raheem Mostert, who is at number 11 here. Raheem Mostert versus the New York Jets this week on Black Friday. I think that it's a situation where you look at it, and I said this guy is the running back 2 heading into last week. I caught a lot of flack for that, and to your credit, you were right. Raheem Mostert was not a good play. And actually, I don't want to say he wasn't a good play. If you watched the game and you actually saw what he did, it was not bad. It didn't kill you necessarily. The point still stands that I said last week. Etienne, when he plays, Raheem Mostert is such a better fantasy back. It's not up for debate at this point. And Etienne went out again last week. Is he playing this week? He's got a chance from what I'm reading, but I would not bank on it. That's for sure. And against the Jets defense on Black Friday on a short week, I don't particularly love it here. But just from the fact that he's on one of the most explosive offenses in football, he's got to be here at the top 12 for sure. I've got Bijan Robinson at number 12 here, taking on the New Orleans Saints. Bijan Robinson has been obviously just one of the most up and down fantasy players in all of fantasy football this year, not just at the running back position. You know, what I really like about Bijan's situation is that before their bye week that they just had last week, he had 22 carries for the Atlanta Falcons. It seems to be, hopefully, that he's trending in the right direction here. If he could continue to trend in that direction, the guy is super efficient. You can see the efficiency on the screen. The guy is just an efficient freaking running back. And he's obviously a great talent. So hopefully Arthur Smith wisens up, sucks up his ego, swallows his pride, and plays Bijan Robinson this week, because if he does, I think he's a top 12 running back. I've got DeAndre Swift and Isaiah Pacheco right back to back. 13 and 14. Swift taking on the Bills and Pacheco taking on the Raiders. So I said this in the last week. You can see the numbers on the screen. They're both so identical in so many ways. They basically handle about the same workload. Carries, targets per game, that's about it. Now, DeAndre Swift is starting to pull away a little bit from a fantasy points per game perspective, but even when you look at their matchup in Week 11, Philadelphia versus Kansas City, DeAndre Swift was excellent in that game. Every touch he had, he was extremely efficient on, and he found the end zone as well. Swift is on a great offensive line. He's got a great offensive line blocking for him, and he's with a great offense in general. You can't just key in to stop the guy. Well, it's the same relatively, but with a lower ceiling with Isaiah Pacheco. The offensive line is good. The weapons are not. They've got no wide receiver help. If Travis Kelce doesn't take the pressure off of Pacheco, it's not as good as it should be for Pacheco. I think Pacheco is just going to be in a situation where he's going to be doubted moving forward, but I employ people to look at what he did last week. He had 19 carries for 90 yards against the Eagles. That's a good run defense, and he almost got 100 yards. Pacheco is clearly the number 2 weapon on this offense, and their numbers are so similar. That's why they're back-to-back here at 13 and 14. I've got Breece Hall at 15 here. He didn't move from last week. He was at 15 last week, and he's taken on the Miami Dolphins on Black Friday. Breece Hall, the point stands every single week, which is that when you look at him and what he's dealing with right now, he's getting about 15 carries per game on the high end and like 10 carries per game on the low end. So he's got a pretty consistent floor as far as volume goes. Now he gets 4 to 5 to maybe 7 targets per game depending. The bottom line is the thing I like about this situation to a certain extent with Breece Hall is that the Jets understand how valuable he is to their offense. He continues to be involved, and as long as he gets opportunities, the guy could break off the big play just like that. At any moment, he could break one off because he's a tremendous player. Now, his efficiency is actually going down. He's averaging like 2 to 3 yards per carry the last several weeks, but this guy is just so capable of hitting a big play, and that's why he's just going to continue to be in the top 20 at the very least right now. I've got Gus Edwards here at 16. It's just time to accept reality with this guy. He has scored like 8 touchdowns in the past 4 to 5 weeks, and he's taken on the Chargers this week, who have a stout run defense, but the Ravens are ripping up everybody. On the ground, they can't be stopped right now. It's Lamar Jackson you got to worry about. It's Keaton Mitchell you got to worry about now. Gus Edwards is leading the backfield. Gus Edwards is just finding the end zone because this offense is super efficient at punching it in with him at the goal line. Gus Edwards, to me, at this point, I don't know how I could tell my audience to bench him. This guy is getting in the end zone, and he's still handling like 12 to 15 carries per game. So with that volume and basically being on one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL, there's no way I could tell you guys to sit this guy right now. Tony Pollard and James Conner at 17 and 18. Pollard taking on the Commanders on Thanksgiving Day, and James Conner taking on the Rams. So Tony Pollard finally had a bounce back. I mean, it was about time. Like, he finally found the end zone again against the Carolina Panthers. The good thing this week is it's on Thanksgiving against the Washington Commanders. Washington's defense is so atrocious, it's actually embarrassing and laughable. So, call me crazy, but I could see 2 straight good weeks for Tony Pollard here on the docket. And James Conner is really, when you look at it, similar workload to Tony Pollard on the screen. Where James Conner's better is he's more efficient. James Conner's more efficient because he has a running quarterback. He hasn't found the end zone yet, but he's averaging right around 16 to 18 carries for between 70 to 80 yards. From an NFL perspective, that's not a bad game. From a fantasy perspective, if he finds the end zone, that's a good week. And this week against the Rams, I like the possibility of it happening. Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon at 19 and 20. Josh Jacobs taking on the Chiefs, and Joe Mixon taking on the Steelers. Now, Mixon's matchup I like a lot better than Josh Jacobs' matchup. Jacobs' matchup versus the Chiefs is tough. And really, I just want to address something really quick with Josh Jacobs. I said this a couple weeks ago, and I caught a lot of flack for it. I had a lot of issues with Josh Jacobs coming into this stretch of the season, simply because his schedule is just going to get worse from here. He didn't have a good game last week. And that was against Miami Dolphins. Kansas City's defense is much better. Josh Jacobs worries me because he may still see the workload of 20 plus opportunities. And Antonio Pierce, in fact, said that after Josh Jacobs only got 14 carries against the Dolphins. So he very well may plan to do that. But against the Kansas City Chiefs, they're probably going to be trailing or they're just not going to be, they're going to be stifled on the ground. Joe Mixon's problem, and the reason that Josh Jacobs is above him, is that Joe Mixon's now playing for a Jake Browning-led Cincinnati Bengals. That's not a good thing. This offense, and I've said this for weeks on Joe Mixon, the only reason I was getting bigger on Joe Mixon is because he had Joe Burrow at the time making his situation so much better. It was so much easier for Joe Mixon to get points in fantasy because of the fact that Joe Burrow was opening up everything. Now he doesn't have that luxury anymore. And I see problems incoming for Joe Mixon while the matchup is relatively good. Etienne here at 21. Now, obviously, this is completely dependent on if he plays. Against the New York Jets on Black Friday, on a short week, I don't love his chances. If he does play, I think he can be played. Now, I'm not going to say, like last week, that he's a must start. I don't think he's that. This guy is having issues with the same knee, and it just may be a washed rest of the season for him. I don't want to believe that's the case because I've enjoyed watching him and he's a great fantasy player for my audience. I want him to play, but I just don't see the upside super high coming into the game hobbled if he plays and against the New York Jets. Jerome Ford at number 22 against the Denver Broncos this week. Jerome Ford just continues to maintain a very steady workload even with Kareem Hunt. That's ultimately what it comes down to here, is that he's still maintaining the majority of the backfield, and he actually is finding the end zone the past couple of weeks. So I think Jerome Ford, they're going to have a better week of offense with another week of Dorian Thompson-Robinson prepping as the starter. So I think that Jerome Ford is a fine play against the Denver Broncos, but I don't love the matchup because, as I've said over the weeks, Denver's becoming a tougher defense. I've got Rachaad White and Javonte Williams back-to-back here at 23 and 24. Rachaad White taking on the Colts and Javonte Williams taking on the Browns. So Rachaad White is above Javonte because of the matchup. Indianapolis' defense has been better, but that doesn't mean that they're not allowing any yardage. Like, they're a bend but don't break defense that's been getting after your quarterback and getting turnovers. They're allowing yardage. It's similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers in a way. Rachaad White is basically, at this point, like, you know what you're getting from him. You're getting a guy who is handling between 15 to 22 opportunities per game between targets and rushes, and a guy who's very efficient, but has the volume that it's worthwhile in a lot of cases, and he's also a touchdown threat. So that's why he's above Javonte, because Javonte went back to less than 20 carries, 20 opportunities last week against the Vikings. So that is a little bit of a worry for me. That's why he kind of stagnates a little bit this week after being ranked a lot higher last week. Taking on the Browns is not a good matchup either way, but especially now that it's a little bit unstable again with the workload, I could see some potential issues here. James Cook and Devin Singletary at 25 and 26. James Cook taking on the Eagles and Devin Singletary taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. James Cook is the story has been the same all year. This guy gets just a completely unpredictable amount of volume every single week, but he does well with everything. This guy is efficient as they come. And against the Eagles this week, this is not a good matchup. Last week, on paper, the matchup wasn't great either against the Jets, and he still had a good game. He had one of his best games in fantasy. So maybe Ken Dorsey being gone is going to be good for James Cook. I still think he's a viable starter at this point. And Singletary worries me every week. I still can't buy into Devin Singletary. Number one, because what if Dameon Pierce returns and he's relevant again? I don't think he's going to take over the backfield again, but there's a chance that he takes away 9 to 10 opportunities from Devin Singletary. And against the Jacksonville Jaguars in a divisional matchup this week, I don't think it's going to be a great week for him. But I keep saying it every week, and he keeps proving me wrong the past several weeks. So, I mean, he's a high upside play right now, but I think his floor is still very low, and that's why it's baked into his ranking this particular week. Brian Robinson at 27. I know it's going to sound low. He's taking on the Cowboys, though, on Thanksgiving Day. I know this one's going to sound low. Brian Robinson has actually been really good in fantasy the past several weeks. And if you look at him season long, he's a top 10 running back. I continue to doubt him because when you look at those numbers on the screen, the guy is just simply not only not that efficient, but he's also just not getting consistent work every week. Sam Howell throws the crap out of the ball every week. He throws at least anywhere between 30 to 40 passes per week. This team barely runs the ball. So Brian Robinson has to get in the end zone. And I don't like his chances against the Cowboys this week. Ramondre Stevenson, Alexander Mattison at 28 and 29. They're very similar to me right now. Ramondre taking on the Giants and Alexander Mattison taking on the Bears. Ramondre's had a good stretch of games over the past several weeks. That's honestly the truth here. Now, they're coming off a bye week and they're taking on the Giants, who on paper, season long, it's not a bad matchup. But what you have seen recently from the Giants defense, it's improvement. It's definitely improvement, for sure. So, Ramondre Stevenson, just because of the fact that he's just simply on a terrible team, a terrible offense, I just can't find it in me to say, you go smash play Ramondre Stevenson. It's just not there right now. And Alexander Mattison, it was impressive to see what he did from a workload perspective. He had 20 opportunities last game against the Denver Broncos coming off a concussion. It was impressive to see that. Ty Chandler was involved, though, and he was more efficient. So how does that divide now and moving forward with Ty Chandler being really effective? I think it's worth a question here. The Bears matchup is not scary. I don't have a problem with you starting a Vikings running back. And just for the record, Ty Chandler is not on the top 30, but he's not far outside. I think they're both legit options this week. And then Jaylen Warren closes us out at 30. Taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll tell you what. Jaylen Warren is one of the most underrated running backs in the league. I'm not even joking. And the reason he's underrated, it's actually nobody's fault other than the Pittsburgh Steelers. If I was a Pittsburgh Steelers player and I was watching Najee Harris come onto the field for Jaylen Warren, I would be like, what are y'all doing? Now, Matt Canada was fired, and Matt Canada is no longer there. I'll tell you this, from years of watching the Steelers, nothing is going to change on this offense. Not a single thing. It will look the exact same as it has all year. I can tell you this from experience. Jaylen Warren is top 30. I wish I could rank him higher, but they're going to continue to have Najee Harris involved, and that's why his ceiling is capped at 30. And as I do at the end of every single ranking video, I'm going to give you my top favorite underdog running back play of the week, and it kind of leads into what I was literally just talking about with Jaylen Warren. I think Jaylen Warren's ceiling is capped because I think Najee Harris is going to get opportunities this week. Now, there is what I just said about Matt Canada being gone. And I don't think it affects that much because Kenny Pickett's just not a good player. So not much is going to be opened up here. Now, what I think about Najee Harris is over the past several weeks, they have gotten him goal line work. That's what they do with Najee Harris. So I think that against a lighter opponent, they're going to have a couple goal line opportunities because this is kind of the Josh McDaniels effect that it took in Las Vegas. When you get rid of a toxic coach that nobody likes, they're going to be excited for the first week back. So I would not be surprised if we saw a much better effort and more explosion and less lethargy out of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense this week, which is why I have Najee Harris as the underdog running back play of the week. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for Week 12 Fantasy Football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for Week 12 Fantasy Football, click on this video right here.